is up, y'all? Happy weekend. We are going to be talking about interracial partnerships and marriages today. And you know me, I always want to give you guys the most cultured, highest quality, just really high class stuff, And so what better way to start it off and to be the star of our show than a little bit of 90 Day Fiancé content. So I love 90 Day Fiancé. I shouldn't. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not super proud of the fact that I love 90 Day Fiancé, but I just do. I like watching it. It's honestly one of the few just trash reality TV shows that I do actually watch and enjoy. I just can't help it though. It's like I want to watch it. It's just so entertaining. And I like watching it when I'm having a really bad day, or if I just really feel like my life is just not on track. I like watching it, and then I can be like, okay, it could be worse. And it just kind of helps ground me, And I think we all need those shows sometimes. So yeah, 90 Day Fiancé. Gotta love it. If y'all are not familiar, there's like 1,000,001 spin-offs of this show. There's like Before the 90 Days, Happily Ever After, After the 90 Days, The 90 Day Fiancé, the original, so many spin-offs, The Single Life, all this stuff, right? But basically, especially with the straight OG original 90 Day Fiancé, it just follows an American person. They find their love, their soulmate in another country, and then they go over there, they meet them, or they don't meet them because they got catfished for 5 years and they wasted their entire life savings on sending some random person money. But they meet this person, they propose after, 3 days of seeing them, and then they file for the K-1 visa so that way they can bring that person over to America. Then they have 90 days in America to legally get married. And so they're living together. They discover how terrible of humans they both are, so on and so forth. And that's the extent of the show, right? That is it. It just follows around these couples. Well, anyway, one good thing I will say about it, that's actually like props to them. They're doing really, really good, especially this season that just came out now of Before the 90 Days. So it's about before they get engaged, when they're first meeting each other, or not meeting each other, because Carmela is actually a prostitute named like Christian or something. Anyway, no spoilers here. So I will say they're doing a super awesome job of their diversity and their inclusion, especially in this season. And you just don't see that in other reality TV shows. Now, granted, like I said, I don't watch a ton of them, but like Love is Blind, come on. Everyone's attractive and relatively in shape. Like the occasional person that isn't super lean, they make that the whole relationship's drama of, oh, is the other person going to accept them once they see them and they see that they're medium-sized, and not model skinny. Like, but they aren't even overweight. They're literally just normal-sized human beings. Like, it's just silly. And then that's just the extent of their body diversity. And so it's like, how are you going to make a show based on don't be superficial, don't judge people by their looks, but then you only put attractive people on the show? You know what I mean? And don't even get me started on Love Island or Too Hot to Handle or any of those ones, because it's insane. It's crazy. But anyway, in this new season of Before the 90 Days, they have an autistic trans girl in there, and they have a deaf person. So I think that's pretty cool because, like I said, you don't normally see that on reality TV. And I think they do a really good job of not handling it, but the way they present these people, it's not like they're not like showcasing the disability or the girl's sexuality as like a fetish or like a shocking thing. You know what I mean? Where they're not directly making fun of them, but like they're making that their personality, They're not doing that. Like for the trans girl, they didn't even announce it until like the second or the third episode in. And it was only because the guy's family like didn't really accept her because of that. And so then they were dealing with that of like, okay, is the guy going to be able to stand up to his family? And or like is the family going to be able to accept her? Is she going to be fine with the conflict, so on and so forth. So they really just kind of like slipped it in there. And so I think that's really cool. Like they didn't make it it wasn't like a huge deal. It was just like, yep, okay, they're from the UK. This is their name. They have cats. Also, they're trans. And their favorite color is blue. Like, they just kind of put it in there. And so, yeah, I just think it's cool. But anyway, where I'm going with this, 5 minutes in, the reason I'm talking about 90 Day Fiancé with interracial partnerships and marriages is a lot of these couples and this is across the seasons, across the show spinoffs, a lot of these couples with their intros, when they're telling their backstory of how they met their person, they'll be like, oh, I met her on VietnameseSingles.com or like whatever, specific ethnicity or nationality dating sites. And I feel like that's weird. I do. I feel like that's setting it up for like a weird fetishization of that ethnicity. Like, oh, I only want to be with a Filipino girl because I like Filipinos. Or like, you know what I mean? Like, it's just like, it would be super weird and arguably racist if a white person said, I'm on whitepeoplemeet.com because I only want to be with a white person. So to me, from that perspective, it's just weird for someone of any ethnicity to be like, oh, I'm only going to be with an Asian or a black person or whatever. Now, the caveat that I will add to that is if it's the same ethnicity as you, like if you only want to date your same race, which I know is then opening the door to double standards, because if it's not okay for white people, why would it be okay for Koreans or black people or whatever? But I just feel like it's understandable if someone is saying, hey, I'm traditional Vietnamese, I want to raise my kids very traditionally, I'm only comfortable with someone who's Vietnamese because they understand the food, they understand the language, they understand the culture. Like, do I fully wholeheartedly support it in the big picture? I don't think so, because then it's ultimately limiting the progression and diversity of all the cultures if you don't share. Like, it's still that closed-minded, whether it's white people or any other ethnicity. To me, it's kind of closed-minded to be like, I only want to be with this ethnicity. But I'm also saying I understand how someone could feel that way. If they just don't want to deal with the misunderstandings, the judgments, the bias, all of that interracial partnerships do have to deal with. I don't know. It's weird. It's definitely a weird dynamic. Like I said, I don't love it, but I can understand why people could see that way. It's weird to me. It's just kind of weird, And something that Daniel pointed out to me that I'd never really noticed before, and then ever since then, it's kind of like all I ever look at, and I notice it way more. But it was back when we were first dating, super early on, and he had kind of brought it up out of nowhere. I don't even think I instigated the conversation, but he just kind of nonchalantly dropped this, and he was like, yeah, we just have a super crazy dynamic, and people look at us kind of funny because normally it's a Korean girl with a white guy. You never see a Korean guy with a white girl. And I was like, really? Like, what? That's kind of weird. But because I'd never really thought of it. And then once he planted that thought in my head, I was like, oh, you're right. Like normally, like if just watching people on the street in stores, if you see a mixed couple, it's crazy to see those gender gaps, which I'll go into in a second, because it does depend on the ethnicity. But full disclaimer here though, I do wonder how much of that is just the military population that I'm surrounded by and that he's surrounded by. Because statistically, the military is still predominantly white men. And statistically, military folks do get married pretty quickly. So it does make sense that military guys are going to have much higher interracial marriage rates, because if they're stationed overseas for however many years, the chances of them having a kid or marrying someone over there, which would then inherently be predominantly a different ethnicity than white, like that chance is going to be pretty high, right? However, with these gender gaps, so they are not similar across the ethnicities. I looked into it, and for Asians specifically, because Daniel said, he was like, it's always white men with Korean women. It's almost never Korean men with white women. So I looked into it. I kind of fact checked him, right? Trust but verify. And so for Asians specifically, Asian women are much more likely than Asian men to marry someone of a different race. Back in 2013, 37% of Asian women married someone who was not Asian, while only 16% of Asian men married outside of their race. And now, granted, that doesn't necessarily mean that they married white people, just anyone outside of their race. The opposite is true, though, for African Americans. So, same study, 2013, 25% of black men married someone outside their race, compared to the 12% of black women who did the same. So, huge jump there. Native Americans have the highest interracial marriage rates among all single race groups, which I think is pretty interesting, but I also feel like they're the forgotten minority. Like, I feel like we talk about all of the other ones all the time, and the Native Americans never get any love or attention. They're just, like, forgotten, and I think that's kind of sad. But anyway, they have the highest rate among all single race groups. And in this group, women are only slightly more likely to marry outside of their race than their male counterparts, with about 61% of females marrying outside their race compared to the 54% of males. So it's about even there. But the gender gap gets weird among white people too. So this data is a little bit older. It's back from 2008 from the Population Reference Bureau, but that's the most recent I could find that showed the breakdown of gender for each ethnicity. But for white men and women, they're just about tied on marrying a Hispanic partner, 51 to 46, and for them marrying an other category, which includes more than one race or, quote, some other race not listed. That's about tied as well, 19 to 20, female to male. But then, when it comes to Asian and black partners, this is super interesting. For some reason, there's a huge shift. So white women were at a 9% rate for marrying an Asian partner, while the white males were at 27% for an Asian partner. So 3 times that rate. And white women were at a 20% rate for marrying a black partner, but the white males were only at 7% for a black partner. So, super, super interesting. I feel like they need to do way more studies on the social and cultural dynamics of that and why that gender gap is so significant across the different ethnicities. Because I feel like that would be super interesting to read. And surprisingly, there wasn't a ton of studies on it. Because like I said, a lot of this stuff, it was like super, super generalized. Like it'd be like, oh, Asians and non-Asians. Or like Asians outside their race, which if you think about it, that could be, Korean to Japanese. That could be Korean to Chinese, Japanese to Chinese, anything like that. And so I'm like, that's not necessarily showing us the picture we want to see. Like it's kind of just like generalized statistics. And I just feel like there's so much to unpack there. Especially with the why. Like, why are some of these gender gaps so significant across different ethnicities? Why are some ethnicities so highly likely to marry outside their race, whereas other ones are not? I don't know. I think there might be something there. I definitely think there's something there. And like I said, the research recently in the last 10 years is significantly lacking. So, yeah. But I have good news for you guys. So this is just like some feel-good statistics that I found. And I'm like, oh, there's hope for society. There's hope for the American society, I should say. There's hope for our quote-unquote American culture, after all. So, and this is cited as one of the biggest statistical changes in American opinion, and that is approval of interracial marriages in the United States. So you gotta celebrate the little wins, But as of September 2022, we are at a new high of 94% approval across the board for interracial marriages. And Gallup polls first started polling Americans of their approval ratings back in 1958, so before it was even legal to marry interracially. And the approval rate was only at 4%. And it's really sweet because it's high approval ratings now across the demographics. So 98% approval for kids 18 to age 29, 97% approval for ages 30 to 49, and even still 91% approval for those 50 and up. For the race, 96% of non-white Americans approve, and 93% of white Americans approve. Even by geographical location, the lowest approval ratings are tied at 93% in the Midwest and the South. So overall, I feel like those are pretty high stats. And I feel like that's good. We're moving in the right direction. So yeah, some feel-good stats for y'all. And then, of course, the prevalence of mixed marriages have increased as well. So back in 1967, when it was first legalized, only 3% of married couples were interracial. Now we're up to 20% according to the Pew Research Center. And one of the reasons that this study cited for the sky-high approval and prevalence ratings was the increasing diversity of Americans. So, which makes sense. Like, your dating pool is going to be bigger. It's going to be more diverse. So, marriages will inherently be more diverse. But what I thought was super cool and interesting, according to this study by Axios, by 2045, they're projecting that the majority of the American population will be a minority ethnicity, aka non-white. So the minorities will finally become the majorities, which I think is really, really cool. But it also, kind of like I said in one of my super, super, super early episodes, it opens the question to the next generations. And one, why do we even still have race as a checkbox option for school applications and job applications and stuff? I don't know. I might just need someone to explain that better to me of why we need to have that. But yeah, if you're a mix, if you've got multiple ethnicities in your blood, like, what box do you check? Do you just check all the boxes? You know what I mean? Like, at some point, we are going to just all blend together. I think it's cool. I think it's a good thing. I think that will be good for our society, as long as we don't try to do the melting pot whitewashing bullshit, where it's like, oh yeah, let's be diverse, let's be a melting pot of cultures and ethnicities, when in reality you're just kind of watering all of those cultures down and just inherently making them white. As long as we don't do that, then I think we'll be okay. But if it's just a general like, hey, we're open to this, let's celebrate all diversities, let's appreciate all diversity, let's acknowledge the validity of all diversity and like all cultures, I think that's a good thing, and I think that's what we should be striving for. But that's just me personally, and what do I know? I did, as I was perusing research, I did see some stats that weren't so awesome of like Republicans or whatever ethnicity in America, their opinions on if it was a good thing or not, if the majority of America was a minority. But I'm not going to include those stats in there because then it's, one, it gets too political, but two, we don't need that type of negativity right now, I don't think. Let's keep it with the positive stats and we'll leave it at that. Because I mean, that was like when I was in middle school and elementary school and stuff. I remember people back home being like, well, why do we have to learn Spanish in school? And this is America, and they should just learn how to speak English, and yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, regardless of the culture, there are, like, neurologically and with the way that kids' brains develop, there are so many studies showing the benefits of learning a language, literally minus just the wealth of knowledge and like the understanding of other cultures and ethnicities, but just purely if you look at the stats of what it does to your brain development and your brain cells and your neural pathways when you learn a language, even just for those things, I'm like, you can't even just let, like, You can't even just acknowledge that that's just a good thing that we should be doing just because. Like, I don't care if it's Klingon. Like, if it's developing kids' brains pathways and the way that they process information and their pattern recognition and all that stuff, cool, let them learn Klingon. So what? You know what I mean? So what if it has a use or not after high school? You're still getting those brain cells to develop in unique ways. But that's just me. That's me on a tangent. I think everyone should learn multiple languages. I think it's a good thing for more reasons than just neural development. But yeah, people, like I said, people in my day were saying, why do we need progression? Why do we need diversity? Why do we have to learn a language? And so thankfully, I think that type of mindset is phasing out. So we're not seeing it as much anymore. It is still there in isolated geographical locations. And that's also, I think, why we're seeing these stats and these rates of, oh, America should be white, America should be the majority, blah, 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 and not a minority. But my hope is that as we all progress, as we all educate ourselves, as we all learn from each other, as we all experience the world more, and as we all honestly marry and date other ethnicities and broaden our horizons and broaden our understandings of other cultures, that's when you're going to be more tolerant of it. That's when you're going to be more understanding. And that's when you're going to have just a bigger picture mindset of some of the benefits of mixing cultures and mixing households with multiple ethnicities. So yeah, I think there's hope for us. I think there's hope for society. We just gotta keep chugging along. Like I said, one conversation at a time. Just be willing to ask those questions. Be open to the answers that you'll get from some of these questions. And you guys know the drill. Make good choices. Be a decent human being. Take care of each other. And I will catch y'all next time. Okay, bye!